Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I lost my arm in an accident, and lately I've been feeling it again. When I got into my accident last year, I woke up in a hospital surrounded by my family. I was disoriented, eyes closed, listening to the sound of muffled sobs. I'd just come out of a terrible nightmare, filled with metal darkness and pressure. Hushed whispers and muffled comments filled my head. My mouth felt like it was filled with cotton. This isn't fair. He was just driving home. Fuck drunk drivers and fuck this. Is he gonna be okay? When should he wake up? It's been 15 minutes since, sir. Shouldn't someone be back by now? How long does it take to find the... Fuck what? Where was I? I tried to move, but my body was slow, sluggish. I heard a steady beeping, the soft hum of machines, could smell antiseptic. Then I heard something terrible. Through the sound of quiet sobs and steady breathing, someone said, "I can't believe they couldn't save his arm." My eyes flared open, the beeping starting to increase in pace. I struggled to focus against the light in the room, in the hospital room. No, 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 no. Please, God, no. My family ran over. Flurried sound of movement and a barrage of concern. I ignored them all. I was paralyzed by fear. The seconds that passed felt like hours. I tried to lift my arms. I felt both of them then, heavy but numb. Relief crashed through me hard and swift, like a wave pouring cold liquid down my spine. I sighed, feeling the tension dissipate. Someone was holding onto my hand, gripping it tightly. I looked at my arms, ready to assess what the damage was. I could only see one under the sheet. I began to shake, my brain losing all functioning thought and reason. I turned my head to the right. Get the nurse, get the doctor, get someone. He's finally Awa dashed. My arm was missing. All that was there was a tightly wrapped stump off of my shoulder. A sling compressed it further. It was gone. It wasn't a nightmare. I was awake. No one was holding my hand. The months after were hard. I met with countless doctors, went to physical therapy, talked to my family, had visits from my friends. People came and went like rotating ghosts. Everyone said the same things. You're so strong. I can only imagine what you're going through. I'm so sorry. Thank God it wasn't worse. Even with the bandages, the meds, the exercises, the reality of it didn't settle in a way people said it would. Everyone talked like adjustment was linear, like grief stepped aside neatly with time. But no one warned me about the quiet moments. When I'd wake up reaching for water with a hand that wasn't there. When I'd turn to scratch my shoulder and feel my muscles move, except they didn't. When my brain would swear I could feel the brush of my blanket, sliding against fingers I physically no longer had. But most often, the sensation that someone was gripping onto my missing hand tightly, to the point where it passed a level of comfort. It felt animalistic, too strong, almost painful. Phantom limb, my doctor called it. Common, normal. It'll lessen with therapy. But it wasn't just a sensation. It wasn't pins and needles or heat or the ache of something lost. It felt real, damn it. Most people tried to skirt around the night. It all went wrong. None of them ever asked about the accident itself. There was an assumed belief that because I was hit head-on, there wasn't my side. But there was... I remembered it. They said I was unconscious when the paramedics found me, that I never woke up at the scene. Anything I remembered was my brain's feeble way of coping, putting a Band-Aid over a gaping wound. They're wrong. I remember everything. What really happened that night. Not in sharp frames like a movie, but in sensations. Hot, cold, pressure, weight, the smell of gasoline, the crunch of metal collapsing, the strange, ringing silence that happens right after impact. I remember my head hanging sideways, vision doubled, blurred, blooming in and out like a dying camera lens. I remember trying to breathe, but feeling like my lungs were tied up with wire. And I remember my right arm, pinned, crushed, or at least that's what should have happened. Because when I reached for something, anything, to pull myself up, my hand didn't hit metal. It hit air, not normal air. Thick, hot, vibrating air. Like touching the space above a stovetop burner. And something in that air touched back. Not lightly, unmistakable. It grabbed me, palm to palm, like it had been waiting. I should have died right then. The paramedics said so later, quietly, in the hallway when they thought I was asleep. "He shouldn't have made it," they whispered. They were right, because in that moment, pressed between two worlds, I felt myself slipping, my body fading while something tugged on my arm from the other side. It wasn't a hand, not really, but it shaped itself like one for me. It was curious, cold, hungry, and when it touched me, I felt everything it was made of, screams, heat, pressure, and a depth so endless it had a weight to it, a place where noise didn't echo because there was no space left for it to go. Hell isn't fire. It's being compressed until your thoughts can't expand. Millions of lost things piled on top of each other until everything feels like suffocation. I felt that through my arm, through that connection. And the last thing I remember before blacking out wasn't pain. It was the overwhelming certainty that something was leached from me in that moment. When I woke up in a hospital with my arm gone, wrapped neatly, sanitized, bandaged like a textbook medical case. That connection wasn't gone, because I could still feel my arm. Not phantom limb, not nerve misfires. Something else. Something still holding my hand. Nowadays, a majority of friends have stopped checking in. They think I've adjusted. It's been a year. I have my first prosthetic. A detachable piece of flesh-colored silicone, inflexible, cold, clumsy. My family still talks about survival, like it's a blessing. Like crawling out of a wreck you shouldn't have lived through is some divine miracle. But over the last year, I've realized something awful. I was never meant to survive that night. I didn't cheat death. I slipped out of something's grasp, and it wants its whole back. It's been changing. The squeezing has hit a peak. The pressure has heightened. The same crushing density I felt in the car. That way of a place too crowded for space to exist. And when the pressure touches me now, I remember the moment before I blacked out. How that thing groped my essence. It wasn't grabbing my arm. It was grabbing me. The arm was just the only part of me it could reach. Now I understand why the paramedics whispered I shouldn't have made it. Because I didn't escape a drunk driver. I escaped whatever is on the other side of that vibrating air. And it noticed. It's been trying to find me again, not through the world, but through the connection it made. The one stretched thin when they pulled me from the wreck and cut my arm away to free me. It's just been trying to finish pulling. Over the past month, the sensations have spread. The pressure crawled from the missing wrist to the shoulder, from the shoulder into my ribs, from my ribs to my spine, like it's searching for the rest of what it touched, the rest of what it marked, the rest of me. And tonight it found something. I think it found me. About an hour ago, the room went silent. Not quiet, silent, like the air thickened into molasses and trapped the sound inside it. My ears popped. My vision dimmed at the edges. My breath felt heavy and wet, impossible to breathe. It was the same feeling I had in the car. Except back then, only my arm was inside that place. Now the pressure is wrapping around my whole body, not squeezing, claiming, and I can feel it thinking, God, help me. I can feel it recognizing me, like a hand patting pockets to find a missing item, and finally feeling the shape it's been searching for. My missing arm isn't what connects us. I am, and as I'm typing this, my vision is starting to double the same way it did that night, blooming in and out like a camera lens drowning in static. The air around me is vibrating, close, hot, too dense to breathe. It's not pulling my phantom hand anymore. It's pulling all of me, slow, steady, certain, like I'm the overdue half of a bargain I never agreed to. I wasn't supposed to wake up in that hospital bed. It was interrupted. And now that the thing from that place has found me again, now that the pressure is pushing through the walls, the floor, the air, now that it's curling around my spine like a new organ, it didn't take my arm. It left it as a marker, a claim, a reminder of what it didn't get to finish. My ears are ringing. My bones feel like they're hollowing out from the inside. My chest is tightening, not just from panic, but from something pressing inward, inward, inward. There's no light, just weight, just density, just inside-out gravity. It's here. It remembers me. And this time, nothing is going to pull me back. Story 2. My childhood friend used to eat silica gel packets. Now he's unrecognizable. Most of the time when you hear about weird kids eating weird things, it's stuff like paste, not silica gel packets. But growing up, that's exactly what my childhood best friend Ellis would do each day. I still remember the day that we first met in grade 1. I was sitting out in the schoolyard during recess, on the one day that my mom forgot to pack me a snack. Ellis saw me without anything to eat and, without me even asking for anything, handed me a packet of salted pretzels. I smiled awkwardly, stuffed in the bottom of my school bag, and then told him apologetically that I don't like pretzels. We both started laughing, and the friendship grew from there. Ellis shared a lot of interest with me, in that we were both geeky and bookish types who loved sci-fi movies and fantasy novels. We would spend hours talking with each other about our favorite fictional characters. You know, the packet says not to eat those, I told him gingerly one lunchtime as he munched away on the moisture-absorbing silica crystals. I pointed to the print saying, "Warning, do not eat on one of the synthetic sachets which were included in most snack packaging." "It's fine," he said, tipping the sachet back into his mouth. "It's actually harmless. They only put that because it's a choking hazard, and I know how to chew." Unfortunately for Ellis, his unconventional snacking habit didn't go unnoticed in our grade. It didn't take for long for other students to notice him eating the silica gel packets and begin making up taunts and jeers about it. "Ew, he's eating that gross white powder stuff," laughed one bully, standing over poor Ellis. "What a freak." "Yeah, Martian boy. Do they eat gel packets back on your home planet?" A girl laughed, waving her hand in front of the glasses. "I made some science chemicals in chem lab today. You should drink those too, nerd," jeered another bully, gulping at the discarded preservative sachet. This continued over the years of our friendship, befalling Ellis several times a week. They would come over and start giving him hell the second they saw one of those small blue gel packets being pulled out of a lunchbox. Ellis was also much nerdier looking than myself, with thick glasses and a wispy frame, which further added to him being targeted. But despite all this abuse, Ellis wasn't swayed from his malign habit. He kept eating those silica gel pouches, chewing them more anxiously, scarfing them down before the bullies saw, or consuming them secretly in the bathroom. Each time that the bullies came over to degrade my best friend, I would avert my gaze, make myself quiet, and try not to attract their attention as they laid into Ellis. It was clear from my behavior that I was embarrassed by my friend's eating quirk. I didn't want to look weird too or get targeted by association, so I would never defend Ellis or get involved, even when the bullying turned from verbal to physical. While I never outright deserted my friend or joined the bullies against him, I never stood up for him. At the time, I figured it was his habit, his battle to fight. This is something that I came to regret as I grew older. It tormented me, knowing I'd let a good friend suffer out of selfishness. I tossed and turned on some nights, kept up late thinking of all the comebacks I wish I'd said to the bullies in Ellis' defense. One childhood too late. Ellis and I matriculated together from elementary school into middle school, but it was high school where we parted ways, with me going to one and him to another. We said fond goodbyes to each other and promised to keep hanging out outside of school, but that promise didn't pan out as I was swept up in high school life. It would be years later, when I was well into my 20s, that Ellis finally returned to my mind. In the middle of watching TV in my apartment one evening, a news report came on that instantly cast my thoughts back to my old friend. And of course it did. It was about silica gel packets. They were being discontinued. Specifically, the brand that had been in all our snacks and treats throughout our school days, which is why it was the only brand of silica that Ellis had eaten. According to the news report, the brand Crystal were being discontinued due to severely toxic substances present in them. The news reporter's words chilled me to my core. They're a simple part of food packaging designed to keep our food dry. But the question is, are they truly safe? Not those from this local producer of them. It is being alleged that crystal silica gel packets were created with scientific waste products, which were not thoroughly understood by researchers at the time. Fortunately, food stored with the packets were protected from this substance by the plastic packaging. It is also not harmful in trace quantities. However, we urge anyone who has accidentally consumed the silica gel and is experiencing health issues to contact 9 News. Switching off the TV, my blood ran cold for Ellis. That surely didn't bode well for his health. That poor kid had eaten several of those sachets every day for his entire childhood. If they were worried about someone eating an odd packet here or there, what would all that do to him? After all, those sachets were allegedly made from discarded waste products, a byproduct of scientists studying crystallization. Apparently, those crystals had vastly more absorbency than normal silica crystals, which is why the company used them to cut corners. But there had to be a trade-off somewhere. A terribly sad thought dawned on me as I wondered if my old friend was even still alive. He could have died from this poisoning during the 15 years since I'd seen him, and I'd have no idea. Pulling out my phone, I gave him a quick search on Facebook, and it was his profile. While populated with few friends, his page looked like it had at least had some activity until earlier this year. The most ominous thing, though, is that there were no profile pictures of him on the page. Instead, he just used various fictional characters' pictures. His current profile picture, a picture of the Wampa Ice Monster from Star Wars, and he'd updated that just a few weeks ago. Well, at least his love for geeky movies hadn't changed. I went to bed that night reassuring myself that my old friend was probably fine, and that if he was dead, he wouldn't be updating anything on Facebook. I still couldn't bring myself to reach out to him, but was content knowing he was likely fine. Still, those same nightmares of regret over failing to stick up for him returned to me that night. I saw those same bullies and was silent as they ripped into him over his habit, one which I know may have cost him his health. However, my torment wouldn't stay confined to nightmares for long. The following Monday, I was leaving my office and getting in my car. Just when I was about to shut my door, I caught a glimpse of something over by a pillar in the car park. Something shiny and jagged, like crystals, like an entire body of crystals. I spun my head around to get a closer look, but it had already ducked back behind the pillar. Right then probably would have been the best time for me to investigate what I saw. But instead, I dismissed the strange sight as a passerby's reflection in a chrome car and pulled out of the parking lot. I didn't see the crystal creature in my workplace parking lot again. But this didn't bring me comfort because instead, I now started seeing it on my various car rides back home. First on the street outside my office building, then at the intersection further down the road, then at the bus stop past the intersection, then in an alley further into my route. I never saw it for more than a few seconds in the evening dark, but it was unmistakable now. There existed some kind of stealthy humanoid creature, completely encased in sharp crystals, and even worse, day by day, it was following me home. I had only seen that glint of synthetic crystalline substance in one place before, but I'd seen it every day for years, and that was in the silica gel sachets Ellis would dig into daily. I could put 2 and 2 together. The news report about my friend's crystal snack being toxic, and the strange crystal monster stalking me. Again, I jumped online at home and started looking old schoolmates up. But this time, instead of Ellis, it was the names of the kids who had bullied him. Their little gang had been made up of about 5 people, and it only now occurred to me that I hadn't heard anything concerning them for years. Searching each of their names, I was shocked to see obituaries. Roy, the leader, had been butchered in his sleep in an unsolved home invasion. Shauna, another of the crew, had suffered a similar fate, having her body ripped apart by an intruder while her family slept. One by one, I learned of each of the animalistic and brutal killings, with descriptions of the former bullies having their flesh pierced and shredded. Found on each of the bodies and in their wounds was a crystal substance, Authorities suspected it was a drug of some kind used by a junkie assailant. I knew instead that it had come from the jagged limbs of the killer itself. I also now knew one more thing, that the creature that had done these killings, my old buddy, had one final target it was coming to kill. He wanted revenge against me for not standing up for him. Helplessness could have consumed me at that moment, but I fought to keep myself rational and calm. Ellis had only killed its targets while they were in bed sleeping. I recalled, it had likely needed to catch them unawares, because it was too physically fragile to kill them otherwise. If Ellis came anywhere near me while I was awake, I would have the power to injure or, if need be, kill him. It hurt me to think about my old pal like that, but I wasn't going to let him savage me while I slept, interrupt my guilty nightmares about him with a real one. That night, I reinforced the door to my apartment with multiple locks and a security alarm. I also made the doorman aware of the deformed intruder, which may attempt to force its way up to my apartment. Leaving out the part about it being a literal crystal monster, of course. Finally, I left a baseball bat near my bedside table. One hit from that would turn my vengeful monstrified friend into a pile of glass. I don't know how I managed to doze off that night, knowing what lay outside coming to kill me, but I somehow did, revisiting my standard regretful dreams. This time, I was one of the bullies, joining in on insulting Ellis. In his eyes, I might as well have been. Suddenly, I was startled awake by the sound of a cupboard door slamming. It was my closet door. I looked up, eyes groggy in the lamplight, and finally saw him up close. Ellis. The creature was horrific, composed of flesh warped into numerous white crystal shards jutting from his body at all angles, as if he'd been frozen in ice stalactites. But these would never melt off. Underneath the translucent white, I saw nothing of his long encased, original body. As it approached my bed, I tried to put my plan into action, but my bat was only knocked to ground by my shaking hand, rolling underneath the bed, transfixed and defenseless. I waited for Ellis to give me what I perhaps deserved. "I'm sorry, buddy," I said resolutely. "I'm sorry for what happened to you, and sorry for not protecting you when you needed it." The crystal creature barely registered my words. Instead, reaching underneath the bed, was he going to bludgeon me with my own bat? To my confusion, the shifting mass of crystal stood up, not with my bat, but with my old school bag from elementary. I'd held on to that for years out of sentimentality. Realization began to dawn on me as its jagged hand rummaged in the bag before pulling out a very old packet of pretzels. Those sharp hands tore the packet apart with ease, scattering pretzels on the ground, and plucked it out. The last crystal silica gel sachet in existence. I watched with awe as it shoved the sachet's contents into its mouth, like Ellis at every recess, and munched it with crystal shard teeth. This entire time, it had wanted that discontinued silica sachet, not to violently kill me like Ellis bullies. He'd never considered me one of them after all, with his one purpose sated. This unearthly being my friend had mutated into shambled backwards. Then, very suddenly, it dove out of the open bedroom window it had entered through. A second later, the sound of shattering glass echoed from the ground. All that was left of him below was a mass of crystal shards and flesh chunks. I went back to sleep that night, and slept well for the first time in a long time, safe and forgiven. Story 3. I took a taxi into fog. That morning, the fog didn't float. It pressed down on the street, heavy and wet, swallowing every sound around me. When I raised my hand, and that yellow taxi appeared, I didn't see it arrive. It just slipped out of the fog, like it had been waiting right beside me the whole time. The car was old, not classic, old. The paint was cracked. The chrome didn't reflect anything. When I opened the door, a thick smell of damp leather, stale sweat, and decades-old cigarette smoke hit me like a wall. The radio was playing some broken jazz track full of static, almost like the speakers were breathing instead of working. "To the station," I said. The driver didn't answer. His hat covered half of his face, and the part one could see wasn't looking at me. It was looking past me, like he expected someone else to climb in behind me. The taxi started with a shudder. As we moved, I realized I didn't recognize a single street. The buildings looked older than they should have been, with cracked facades and windows covered by curtains that moved even though there was no wind. It felt like we were driving through a part of the city that didn't exist anymore, or shouldn't. When we stopped, I pulled out my card. The driver frowned like I'd handed him something rotten. What the hell is this? We only take cash here. I found a few coins in my pocket and handed them over. He took them slowly, turning his head just enough to speak in a low voice. Welcome to a reality that ain't for everyone. Before I could ask what he meant, the taxi slid back into the fog and vanished without a sound. The station loomed in front of me. Not big, but wrong. The proportions looked slightly off, like the building leaned forward a little. The broken windows weren't reflective. They were just dark, like empty sockets leading to someplace deeper than a room. As soon as I stepped through the entrance, a cold draft wrapped around my legs. It wasn't normal cold. It felt like it was coming from the ground itself. The air smelled of damp, rust, and something else, like a room that's been locked away from light for years. Inside, the silence wasn't complete. There was a low hum, faint and distant, and I couldn't tell if it came from the walls or my own ears. Every step echoed with a delay that didn't match the sound I made, like the building was repeating it from someplace deep below the floor. I walked toward the ticket booth. The man behind the glass stood perfectly still, so still that I wasn't sure he was alive. I tapped the frame. He lifted his head with a stiff, unnatural movement. His skin was grayish, his lips cracked, his eyes dull. A dark line of saliva hung from the corner of his mouth. When he stood up, he released a low growl that scraped the air. Then the glass buckled under his weight. A freezing hand, much stronger than it should have been, clamped onto my wrist. He pulled me toward his open, broken mouth. His jaw snapped with a practiced mechanical rhythm. He tried to bite me. I elbowed him in the face. The sound was wet and sickening. We fell into the broken glass. His breath smelled like rot, thick enough to sting my eyes. His snapping jaw searched blindly for my skin. My hand found a piece of metal on the floor, and I slammed it against his temple. His grip loosened. I didn't look back. I just ran. But the silence behind me was gone. Now I heard dragging, scraping, uneven breathing. Shadows shifted where there shouldn't have been any. Figures started coming out of corners I swore had been empty. Their movements were wrong, unbalanced, like they weren't used to carrying their own weight. Some dragged their feet. Others walked too quickly, like they were remembering how to move. And every single one of them turned toward me at the same time, not randomly. They recognized me. I backed away, and the echoes multiplied. More footsteps, more breathing, coming from tunnels farther away, all joining into a rhythm that made my skin crawl. I spotted an old train car sitting dead on an abandoned track. It wasn't safe, but it was the only barrier I had. I ran, jumped inside, slammed the door shut, and wedged a metal bar across the handles. Then I crawled under the seats and tried to quiet my breathing, but my lungs were shaking. The banging started immediately. Fists, palms, nails dragging along the metal. Bodies hitting the side with dull, heavy thumps. Each impact made the whole car shiver. Then the light went out. Not suddenly, slowly, like something darker than darkness was sliding into the corners, filling the gaps, moving under the seats toward me. And the deeper the shadow got, the colder the air became. A low, wet murmur rose from the metal floor. Not one voice, many layered on top of each other. Every time I inhaled, the murmur shifted, matching my breath, getting closer. I grabbed my right arm. The pain was still there, a sharp, misplaced throb. I hadn't wanted to look, but the shadow was coming with such slow, deliberate intent that I needed to know before it reached me. I rolled up my sleeve. No bite, no deep tear, but scratches. Thin, red, raised lines, skin scraped by cold, desperate fingers. They didn't bleed. They burned. Was that enough to infect me? I didn't know. No one could know anything in a place like that. But as I stared at those uneven marks, I felt something pulsing beneath them. A slow, tingling rising toward my elbow, like a current that didn't belong to me. I tried to tell myself it was fear, shock, adrenaline, anything human, but the doubt tore right through me. If their disease could pass through those scratches, if those nails dragging across my skin were enough, then maybe I wasn't hiding from them anymore. Maybe they were just waiting for me to stop being me. The zombies don't stop. The metal bar is starting to bend, and I can't find a way out. Story 4, Narcosis. The depth gauge on my wrist computer read 84 meters. That's roughly 275 feet of crushing black water. Channeled through a limestone throat so narrow that my stage tank scrapped against a rock with the screech of metal on bone. We were in the gut. A restriction in an uncharted cenote system somewhere beneath the jungle floor, miles from the nearest extraction point. My dive partner, Beckett, was ahead of me. I could see the yellow tips of his fins and the violent, jerky halo of his primary light cutting through the absolute dark. We were pushing too hard. I knew it. He knew it. The dive profile was aggressive, borderline suicidal for a two-man team on open circuit. But the survey grant was expiring, and Beckett had this feverish obsession with connecting the gut to the main aquifer. Check pressure. I mumbled into my regulator, the words gargled by the mouthpiece. I tapped my light against my tank. Clank, clank, the signal to check in. Beckett didn't respond. He kicked harder, his fins churning up the silt layer on the floor. That's the cardinal sin of cave diving. You do not touch the bottom. The floor of a virgin cave is composed of eons of settled clay and organic decay. If you disturb it, you trigger a silt out. The water turns from crystal clear to chocolate milk in seconds. You lose up, down, and the exit. A cloud of brown fog rolled backward from Beckett's fins, swallowing me. I cursed, purging my buoyancy compensator to halt my forward momentum, trying to backfin out of the cloud. But the tunnel was too tight. The silt enveloped me. My light beam died, scattering into a useless, blinding white wall against the particles suspended in the water. Beckett! I shouted, forgetting he couldn't hear me. I reached out for the guideline. The thin nylon string that was our only physical link to the surface. My hand grasped empty water. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I swept my arm left, then right. Rock, rock, water, no line. Beckett must have cut on a jagged edge, or pulled the wrap loose when he surged forward. I was blind. I was deep, and I was breathing air at a depth where nitrogen acts like a narcotic. At 84 meters, the partial pressure of nitrogen affects the brain like 4 or 5 martinis on an empty stomach. They call it the martini effect. It slows your reaction time, kills your fear response, and replaces logical thought with a fuzzy, euphoric acceptance of death. I forced myself to hover, breathe, in, out. The sound of my own respiration was deafening. Hiss click, roar, bubble rumble. I checked my SPG, submersible pressure gauge. 110 bar. Maybe 20 minutes of air at this depth if I stayed calm. 5 if I panicked. I decided to wait. Sometimes, if the current is right, a silt out clears. I floated in the brown void, feeling the immense weight of the rock above me. That's when the narcosis started to whisper. It wasn't a voice. It was a feeling, a sensation that the water wasn't water at all, but syrup. I felt warm. The crushing cold of the subterranean river faded into a pleasant, numbing heat. I felt the urge to spit out my regulator, just to see what the water tasted like. It probably tasted like iron, like blood. No, I told myself, clamping my teeth down on the rubber mouthpiece. That's the narc. Stay sharp. Then I saw the light. It was faint at first, a diffused glow penetrating the silk cloud ahead of me. It swung rhythmically. Left, right. Beckett. He had turned around. He was coming back for me. I tapped my tank again. Clank, clank. The light stopped moving. It hung there, suspended in the murk, maybe 10 feet away. I waited for him to signal. The standard, okay sign. The thumb up for terminate dive. Anything, The light just hovered. I finned forward cautiously, my hand outstretched. The silt was thinning slightly, settling into the heavy, stagnant layer below. As I moved closer, the silhouette of a diver emerged from the gloom. It was Beckett. He was hovering vertically, his trim perfect, his arms dangling at his sides. Beckett. I thought, relief washing over me. Line. Where's the line? I flashed my light in his face, signaling for attention. Beckett didn't react. He just floated there, drifting slightly in the weak current. I got closer, within arm's reach. That's when I noticed his gear. His BCD, buoyancy control device, was unbuckled at the shoulder. One of his side mount tanks was hanging by a single hose, dangling like a severed limb. And there was something wrong with his bubbles. There were no bubbles. He wasn't breathing. I froze. The narcosis fuzz in my brain suddenly sharpened into a distinct, jagged horror. If he wasn't breathing, he was dead. He had stroked out, or an embolism had hit him, or he'd panicked and held his breath. I reached out to grab his harness, to shake him. Beckett's head snapped up. It wasn't a slow drift. It was a mechanical, violent jerk, chin to chest, then snapping upright to look me dead in the eye. My light beam hit his mask. His eyes were wide open, not the vacant stare of a corpse, but the hyper-focused, dilated stare of something predatory. But it was the mouth that froze my blood. Beckett didn't have his regulator in his mouth. It was floating behind his head. He was smiling at 84 meters. The water pressure is roughly 135 pounds per square inch. If you open your mouth without pressurized gas pushing back, the ocean forces itself into your lungs with the force of fire hose. You drown instantly. Your lungs collapse. Beckett was grinning at me, his teeth white and perfect in the harsh LED light. His lips were pulled back to the gums. No water was rushing in. No bubbles were rushing out. He just hovered there, mouth open in that impossible, wide rictus, staring at me. Narcosis, my brain screamed. This is a hallucination. You are narked out of your mind. He's dead, and your brain is drawing a face on the tragedy. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted to 3, and opened them. He was closer. He hadn't finned. He hadn't moved his legs. He had simply translated through the water. He was inches from my face mask now. I could see the pores on his nose. I could see the tiny capillaries in the whites of his eyes. And I could see that his throat was moving. A rhythmic, pulsating bulge traveled up his neck, under the skin, like a swallow working in reverse. He reached out. His hand, gloved in black neoprene, then grabbed my harness. It reached for my face, specifically for my regulator. I slapped his hand away. It felt solid, real. Get back. I screamed into my mouthpiece, the sound muffled and useless. Beckett's smile widened. It stretched. The corners of his mouth didn't stop at the molars. The skin of his cheeks tore, not with a rip, but with a wet, silent separation, like pulling apart raw dough. The smile kept going, splitting his face all the way to the ears. Inside his mouth, there was no tongue. There was no throat. There was a pale, translucent tube, a fleshy siphon, pulsating, lined with rows of tiny, translucent cilia that beat against the water. It wasn't Beckett. It was something wearing Beckett. I kicked. I slammed my fins into the rock floor, exploding the silt again, not caring about visibility anymore. I needed distance. I backpedaled, scraping my tank against the ceiling of the cave, hyperventilating. Hiss, hiss, hiss. My regulator delivered air in frantic bursts. I shone my light into the brown cloud. Nothing. Then a sound. Sound travels 4 times faster in water than in air. It comes from everywhere at once. You can't directionalize it. Click, click, click. It sounded like wet stones banging together, or teeth snapping. I checked my pressure gauge. 50 bar. I was burning through air. I had to leave. I had to find a way out. I turned 180 degrees, putting the silk cloud behind me, and swam blindly into the darkness. I prayed. I was heading back toward the entrance, back toward the wider cavern where the sunlight might filter down. The tunnel narrowed. My chest scraped the floor. My tank scraped the roof. A restriction. I didn't remember this restriction. Wrong way. You went the wrong way. I tried to back up, but my tank valve caught on a limestone protrusion. I was stuck. I twisted my hips, trying to wiggle free. The rock held me fast. I was pinned 84 meters down in a stone coffin. Click, click. The sound was louder, closer. I twisted my head, looking back over my shoulder, back down the tunnel I had just squeezed through. My dive light cut a cone through the clear water behind me. Beckett was there. He wasn't swimming. He was crawling. He was pulling himself along the floor using his elbows and knees, moving with a jerky, insectal coordination that shattered the human anatomy. His legs bent at the wrong angles. His back was arched backward, concave, like a broken doll. He stopped 10 feet away. The silt had settled enough that I could see the details. The Beckett suit was loose now. The neoprene was wrinkled, sagging. Whatever was inside had shrunk, condensing itself. The head hung limp, chin on chest. Then the neck snapped up again. The smile was gone. The lower jaw was gone. It hung loose, detached, flapping against the neck. From the gaping hole where the mouth used to be, the siphon emerged. It was longer now, thick as a python, pale and translucent. It weaved in the water, sensing the current, sensing the vibrations of my panic. I saw movement inside the siphon. Something dark and solid was being pushed up from the chest cavity, traveling through the tube. It was Beckett's dive computer. The entity spit it out. The plastic puck clattered against the rock floor. Then it spit out a wedding ring. Then a tooth. It was purging the inedible parts. I struggled against the rock, thrashing, screaming into my regulator until my throat tasted like copper. My SPG read 10 bar. 2 minutes, maybe less. The entity resumed its crawl. Scrape, drag, click. It didn't have eyes anymore. The eyes had rolled back in the skull, replaced by the glistening white meat of the parasite. But it knew exactly where I was. It knew I was trapped. It stopped right at the soles of my fins. I felt a hand, or what remained of a hand. The bones crushed together into a grappling hook, clamp onto my ankle. The narcosis hit me then, a final, tidal wave of warm indifference. The terror didn't vanish, but detached. I watched it happen from a distance. I watched as the Beckett thing pulled itself up my legs. I felt the weight of it settling on my back, pressing me down into the silt. I heard the hiss of my regulator delivering the last dregs of air. The needle hit zero. The next breath was hard, a vacuum. I looked at the rock in front of my face. There was a fossil there, a tiny spiral shell, millions of years old. It was beautiful. A face appeared next to mine. It was a mask, Beckett's face, hollowed out, draped over the entity like a wet rag. The siphon pushed through the torn cheeks, seeking a seal. It pressed against my regulator. It wanted in. I realized then why it had warned Beckett. It wasn't just camouflage. It was a pressure suit. It needed a shell to hold its form against the weight of the deep, and Beckett's shell was broken. It needed a new one. I spat out my regulator, not to fight, but to welcome the water, to let the ocean crush my lungs before it could take them. But the water didn't come. The siphon latched onto my open mouth instantly. It tasted like rot and ancient, stagnant brine. It formed a perfect, airtight seal over my lips. And then it pushed air into me. It breathed for me, a recycled, foul gas pumped from its own bladder into my lungs. It was keeping me alive. It needed me warm. It needed me fresh. As the siphon began to slide down my throat, expanding to fill my esophagus, the narcosis finally offered me a small mercy. I started to laugh. I couldn't make a sound, plug as I was, but my diaphragm spasmed in a silent, shaking loop. I was going to be the new suit, and we had a long swim back to the dark. Story 5. My son said Santa was in his room. It wasn't Santa. I'm writing this with hands that won't stop shaking, sitting in the dim glow of my laptop screen. The sun is still hours away, and I don't dare turn on any other lights. I have to get this down. I need someone, anyone, to know that I'm not crazy, even though every rational part of my brain is screaming that I have to be. It started with my son, but it's not about him anymore. It found me, and I'm so afraid. It all began so innocently. The Christmas season was settling over our quiet suburban neighborhood like a gentle blanket of snow. Lights twinkle on every house. Inflatable snowmen wave from frozen lawns, and the air smelled like pine and cinnamon. Leo was completely swept up in the magic. His every waking moment was about elves, reindeer, and of course, the big man himself, Santa Claus. We read The Night Before Christmas until the pages went soft. We must have rewritten his letter a dozen times. His crayon-scrawled list a testament to his pure belief. He was just a little beacon of Christmas joy. That's why the screaming felt so wrong. The first time it happened, I stumbled into his room, my heart hammering, expecting to find him sick or hurt. But he was just sitting bolt upright in his bed. His eyes were wide with fear I'd never seen before, staring at the corner where his rocking chair sat draped in shadow. "He was here, Mommy," he sobbed, burying his face in my shoulder. Santa was here. I held him tight, stroked his hair, and murmured all the soothing things a mother is supposed to say. "Oh, sweetie, you just had a bad dream. Santa's at the North Pole. He's very busy getting ready." He just shook his head against my chest. No, he was right there. He was watching me. The next night, it happened again, and the night after, the routine was always the same. A blood-curdling scream between 2 and 3 in the morning, me rushing to his side, and his terrified insistence that Santa had been in his room. My husband, Tom, could sleep through a hurricane. He'd stir, mumble something about just bad dreams, and roll right back over, trusting me to handle it. And I tried. I really did. I explained that dreams can feel very, very real. I told him that with Christmas so close, it was only natural that Santa was on his mind. I even tried telling him how lucky he was that Santa was checking in on him. That was a huge mistake. "He's not nice, Mommy," Leo whispered, his voice trembling. "His smile is too big." A chill that had nothing to do with the winter air snaked down my spine. A smile too big? It was such a strange, specific detail for a 4-year-old to just invent. Still, I clung to logic. He'd seen dozens of Santas by now on TV and books at the mall. Maybe one had a weird grin, and his dreaming mind twisted it into something monstrous. Kids have vivid imaginations. I told myself that over and over, like a mantra. But the nights wore on, and Leo's fear didn't just linger. It got worse. He started fighting sleep. He'd scan the shadows in his room, his eyes darting back and forth as I tucked him in. My joyful, Christmas-obsessed little boy was being replaced by a pale, haunted child with dark circles under his eyes. He stopped talking about sleigh bells and started muttering about long, long fingers. He said the reindeer weren't on the roof. They were scratching at his window. My patience started to fray. I was exhausted, running on caffeine and fumes, and my own nerves were shot. Something had to give. I had to prove to him that there was nothing there. The idea hit me one morning, while I was watching Leo listlessly push cereal around his bowl. He looked so fragile. I had to give him his security back. That's when I thought of it. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I have a super secret idea. How would you like to set up a Santa detector?" His eyes flickered with a tiny spark of interest. "A detector?" "Yup, a special camera. We'll put it in your room, and it'll watch over you all night. If anyone, and I mean anyone, tries to sneak in, we'll catch them on video. Red-handed." I framed it as a fun spy mission. We were a team. He was the chief officer in charge of monitoring for unauthorized Santas. A small smile touched his lips for the first time in days, and that was all the encouragement I needed. That afternoon, I bought a simple Wi-Fi security camera, the kind you use as a baby monitor. Standing in the electronics aisle, I had to laugh at myself. buying surveillance equipment to debunk my 4-year-old's delusions about a malevolent Saint Nick. It was insane, and yet, as I paid, I couldn't shake a tiny sliver of unease. That evening, Leo and I set up together. He chose the spot. On his bookshelf, opposite his bed, it had a perfect view of the entire room, including the rocking chair in the corner. We downloaded the app to my phone and waved at the little lens. He seemed empowered. His fear briefly replaced by a sense of control. "Now we'll see him," he said, his voice a mix of fear and excitement. "Now we'll see that there's nothing there, sweetie," I corrected gently. That night, I lay in bed with the app open on my phone, the small, grayscale image of my son's room glowing on a nightstand. I watched him toss and turn before finally settling down. I stared at the feed for what felt like hours, tracing the familiar shapes in the dark. It was just a room, a quiet, still empty room. Eventually, my own exhaustion won, and I drifted off, feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe this would finally break the spell. The next 2 nights were peaceful, blissfully, miraculously peaceful. Leo slept straight through. No screams, no tears. I started to relax. The tension coiled in my shoulders began to unwind. It was working. The camera was the placebo he needed. I felt a rush of relief so profound it was almost dizzying. Mark clapped me on the shoulder and called me D'Armand. We were getting our little boy back. The nightmare was over, or so I thought. It was the 4th night of the camera's watch. I hadn't even bothered to keep the app open. The problem was solved. I was deep in the first truly restful sleep I'd had in a month when a soft chime from my phone pulled me awake. A notification. Motion detected in Leo's room. My first thought was annoyance. The sensitivity must be too high. A dust mote, maybe, or Leo was just rolling over. I rolled over myself, ready to ignore it, but something held me back. A cold, prickling sensation on the back of my neck. "Just check," a voice in my head urged. "Just look." With a heavy sigh, I reached for my phone. I unlocked the screen and opened the app. The live feed blinked into view. Everything looked normal. There was Leo, a small lump under his comforter, fast asleep. The room was still. I squinted at the grainy, infrared image, about to close the app when I saw it. It wasn't in the corner with the rocking chair. It was closer, much closer, huddled in the space between the end of Leo's bed and the wall. At first, it was just a shape, a distortion of darkness that didn't belong, long and angular, folded into the shadows in a way that seemed wrong. I held my breath, my knuckles white on the phone. My mind scrambled for an explanation, a trick of the light, a pile of laundry, anything. Then it moved. It unfolded, not a sudden movement, but a slow, deliberate uncoiling like a spider. It rose from its crouch, its form becoming clearer in the ghostly black and white. It was tall, impossibly tall and thin. Its limbs stretched like warped branches. It was pale, a stark, sickly white against the gray room. It wore no clothes that I could see, just a skeletal frame covered in tight, smooth skin. It took a silent step towards Leo's bed, and I saw its hands. The fingers were long, too long. They ended in what looked like dirty, jagged talons. A gasp caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, to run into his room, to snatch him from his bed, but I was frozen, paralyzed by a terror, so absolute it felt like a physical weight pressing me down. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was watch the tiny, horrifying movie playing out on my phone. The creature stood over my son's bed for a long moment, perfectly still, and then slowly it lowered its head. Its face came into view for the first time. It was a blank, featureless canvas, except for 2 things. 2 large, dark, empty sockets where I should have been, and a mouth, a thin, black line that suddenly, grotesquely stretched. It split its face in half, pulling back into a wide, silent grin of pure malice. Leo's words echoed in my mind. His smile is too big. This was it. This was his Santa. Not a bad dream, but a real, physical thing of absolute nightmare fuel, standing over my sleeping son. My heart felt like it was going to explode. And then the worst possible thing happened. as if it could feel me watching, as if it could sense my terror through the Wi-Fi signal. The creature stopped looking at Leo. With a slow, fluid motion, it turned its head. It tilted its face up, and the black voids of its eyes found the small, blinking red light of the camera. The grin widened, if that was even possible. It was looking right at me, through the lens, through the screen, through the darkness of my own bedroom. It saw me, and in that moment, I felt a terrifying, silent acknowledgement. It knew I was watching. The game had changed. It wasn't interested in the sleeping child anymore. It was interested in me. I threw the phone onto the mattress as if it were on fire. The image burned onto the inside of my eyelids. The pale skin, the long limbs, the black eyes, and that smile, that awful, awful smile. I lay there rigid, listening for a sound from my son's room. A scream, a footstep, anything, but there was only silence. A heavy silence that was somehow more terrifying than any noise. After what felt like an eternity, I forced my shaking hands to pick up the phone again. The room was empty. The creature was gone. And Leo was still fast asleep. For the first time in weeks, he slept through the entire night. The next morning, Leo woke up a different kid. Bright, cheerful, full of energy. He didn't mention Santa. He didn't glance nervously at the corners of his room. It was like a great weight had been lifted from him. He was free, but my relief was a cold, hollow thing, because I knew the truth. The burden hadn't vanished. It had just been transferred to me. I saved the video. A tiny 3-megabyte file of pure horror. I watched it only once more in the harsh light of day, just to prove I hadn't lost my mind. It was real, grainy and dark, but undeniable. The unfolding shape, the skeletal frame, the turn of the head, the eye contact. It was all there. I thought about showing it to Mark, but what would I say? Honey, you know those bad dreams Leo was having. Turns out he was being visited by a 7-foot-tall monster, and here's the blurry video to prove it. He'd think I was crazy. He'd have me committed. I was completely alone in this. It started subtly, a persistent feeling of being watched. The kind of feeling that makes the hair on your arm stand up. I'd be washing dishes and catch a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision, but when I'd turn, nothing. I'd be in the basement and hear a floorboard creak upstairs, even though the house was empty. Then came the nightmares. Vivid, hyper-realistic, and always the same. I was in my bed, paralyzed, unable to move or scream, and the creature from the video would be in the room with me. Sometimes it would just stand in the doorway, a tall, spindly silhouette. Other times, it would be at the foot of my bed, just like with Leo, its head tilted, that terrible grin stretched across its face. It never touched me. It just watched me with those black pits for eyes, and I would be consumed by a fear so potent it felt like it was dissolving me from the inside out. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing, the silence of my own room feeling more menacing than the dream itself. I stopped sleeping. How could I? Sleep was no longer a refuge. It was a guaranteed appointment with that thing. I'd lie awake for hours, staring into the dark, listening to every creak of the house. I lost weight. My hands developed a permanent tremor. Mark grew concerned, suggesting I see a doctor. I just blamed it on stress, an empty, ironic excuse. I was living in a secret, personal hell, and I couldn't tell a soul. The phenomena began to bleed into my waking hours. It was getting bolder. One afternoon I heard it, a faint scratching. It was coming from inside the wall, right behind my head. Scritch, scrape, scritch, like long nails dragging slowly across drywall. I froze, pressing my ear against the cool paint, and the sound immediately stopped. Another time, I woke up to a strange, musty smell, like damp earth and decay, thick in the air around me. It was gone as quickly as it came. The encounters grew more direct. One night, I woke to pressure on the end of the bed, the mattress dipping as if something heavy was sitting on it. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears leaking out, praying for it to be my imagination. The pressure remained for what felt like an hour, an unmoving, malevolent presence pinning me in place with sheer terror. When the first hints of dawn broke, the pressure lifted. I was alone again. I was becoming a ghost in my own home, moving through my days in a fog of fear. Every shadow held a threat. Every noise made my heart pound. The worst incident happened last week. I had finally drifted off, only to be jolted awake by a feeling of intense cold. I opened my eyes, and it was right there, not in the doorway, not at the foot of the bed. It was standing right beside me, leaning over me. Its face was inches from mine. I could see the texture of its pale skin like stretched parchment. I could see the blackness in its eye sockets, voids that seemed to drink the light from a room, and its smile was wider than ever. For the first time, I felt its breath on my cheek. It was cold, a deep, subterranean cold, like air from a tomb. It smelled of rot and something anciently, terribly wrong. I didn't scream. I couldn't. We stayed like that for a second that stretched into an eternity. Its empty gaze locked on mine. Then it pulled back, straightened to its full, terrifying height, and just faded into the shadows. That brings me to tonight. Christmas Eve. The stockings are hung by the chimney. Presents are under the tree, its lights blinking cheerfully in the dark. Leo is tucked snugly in his bed, dreaming of the joy the morning will bring. He is safe. He is happy. That is the only thing, the only sliver of light I have left. He's dreaming of sugar plums while I'm forced to live his nightmare. My husband is asleep upstairs. I can't be in that room. Not tonight. I came downstairs, telling myself I had to wrap a few last-minute gifts. But I can't. I can only sit here and type, because I know it's here. In the house. The feeling is stronger than it has ever been. It's not waiting for me to fall asleep anymore. An hour ago, I heard the floorboards in my bedroom creaked. A slow, heavy groan. Then, a few minutes later, a footstep on the top stair. And another. It's coming down. It's not trying to be quiet anymore. There's a scratching sound. It's coming from the hallway, just outside the living room. A low, patient sound. The sound of long nails dragging against the doorframe. It knows I'm in here. It's waiting. I don't know what it wants. I don't know what will happen when it finally comes in. But I know one thing with a certainty that chills me to my soul. I know it's not Santa. Story 6, The Masterpiece. Not many people know that there's a dead painter in my backyard. It's true. It's something I tell my dinner guests when they have the capacity to visit, though this prompts them to collect their children away from the backyard beneath, which has buried a dead man, and scurry off into the night. Not a foot ever set back onto my property, it seemed. Not for many years. I once had a child come back to my property after he had grown, and he asked why his parents had collected him so hastily and prevented him from ever coming back to see me again. I told him what I already told you, and what I am about to tell you. There is a dead painter in my backyard, and you had traps upon his grave. And the painter never wanted anyone to do that because he had made his grave and gravestone himself, molded from his paints and paint brushes into a large spire protruding from the dirt before which he dug a large hole, then laid himself down in a hole and did himself in a way. And that spire is fragile, strong against a storm, but brittle at the touch of man, no matter how much of a gentle countenance you may. Bear unto it, that weekend, the weekend he buried himself. There was a torrential storm, and the elements blanketed the painter with the dirt he had scrounged to the side of his grave. There were 2 mounds of dirt, one to its right, one to its flank, to account for the 6 feet of earth removed to make the painter's gate to hell. 6 feet in 2 miles, and they both individually seemed higher than 3 feet. They looked more like a stubby 4. The painter had been dead 4 days by that time which conditioned his body to become a loose assortment of rotting skin that decayed into a viscous, liquefied form when the rain struck it. By the time the dirt covered his whole body, only his legs, covered in brown fancy pants, had not been torn of its skin and turned into a skeleton. No one knew of the painter's corpse in his, my, backyard except his mother, who had seen him dead in the hole and consequently lost every fiber of her sanity. never bringing herself to go back outside and bury her baby boy properly. It was none other but I who was responsible for sending the poor thing to the sanitarium down by the port. She, confined behind whitewashed walls, let God and Mother Nature do the things she was too mad to do and bury her son. When time came around to pass the house on, empty houses make great ghosts after all, I bought it for myself and the painter's mother for nothing more than meager pennies on the dollar. Too much of a pittance to the woman to definitely not serve a profit, but enough to make a considerable chip in my pecuniary goings-on. After such, I did the most humanly thing possible and fathered 5 children within the house, one for a different wife. None of them, children and wife, stuck around much long after I told them, "Honey, we've got a dead painter in our backyard." I haven't seen the children they took with them to wherever they chose to go. Haven't seen them in up to 22 years. Their lives are much too gone now to be mine to see. I never went outside to unbury the mound that now bulges slightly in my backyard, takes steel to the little rise that takes form near my petunia garden, as the earth itself sprouted a low pimple near a flush of beard. It is not enough of a mound to bother flattening it, though it proves enough of a nuisance that I do trip and fall over it as I see more time pass and kill my bones. The painter was a friend. I cherished him more than his own father, a wretched bastard who made him a bastard. Anyway, I have died enough that I cannot do anything myself anymore without hired assistance, because that pecuniary hole still hasn't entirely closed, still bleeds. Look out to the spire. It's faded. Its color is now gray and dim, out by the tree line. It's conspicuous enough a foot into the past that, with a little strain from easement, you can see it pronounced against dark bark. Beneath it, though offset in front of it a foot, are the remains of a dead painter, a dead friend. I believe that if you dig up his bones, there in the dirt they will be, and absorbed into the dirt will be all the paint he consumed to kill him. When I'm dead and gone, you can go and unbury him, if you so like. I regret enough not burying him, that I would never unbury him consciously, never as long as I am driven by my remaining moral fiber. When I give up this house, you will be the only person to decide for my painter friend. Do you leave in peace, or do you do the proper thing, wake him up, violate his home space, get him God's proper burial, God's proper send-off, though his slumber has been 50 years going? Now, for me, think of it if you must, but never enact upon it. If you are so compelled, just go over and stick a sign in the ground, stick a knife in his door, or paint over the painted words of the painter's name up on the spire, around and to its back. If you so wish to demean his masterpiece, repaint this house. Paint my coffin red before you paint it blue. But you don't repaint the strokes of an artist's signature. You let it pronounce its worth, and let its worth pronounce it. If it has worth, it will stay and keep its eye on us. If it has none, then I believe you can muster enough intelligence to find out what happens thus. And 2, when you bury me far from my friend, next to my mother, not my father or my children. Both have lived lives I don't want to hear about, and am not obligated to know anymore. In heaven, I would still like to rest my head on my mother's lap and let out 70 years a sigh. I do not know what compelled the death of my friend. I don't want to meet him in heaven. I want his spire and his memory. Not, never, the truth that led to either. Story 7. Gluttony is not a sin. Trigger warning, blasphemy. It's been a while, Joan. I was starting to think you don't need therapy anymore. Joan looked at me like she just smelled sour milk. She clearly didn't think she did. I was surprised when my secretary told me she was here. I considered her one of my greatest successes as a therapist. I don't, she replied forcefully. You've really helped me a lot the last 3 years. I'm a more confident, less fearful person than I was when we started. But I've been having these dreams about the entity. The entity? She nodded. Yes, you have to say it with your whole chest. Though, the entity. It's disrespectful not to. Right, the entity. Yes, always say it like that. I've learned a lot about higher powers this month while talking to the entity. They're very particular about how they're addressed. Of course, these dreams you've been having about the entity, you believe they're real? I know they're real. Have you been taking your medication, Joan? Yes, I have. No need to get testy, I said quickly. She was glaring at me. The question had come out less tactfully than I'd hoped, but she had issues with being around other people before, not delusions or hallucinations. Whatever this was, it was new. I added, I was just asking. Tell me more about the entity. She sighed. I could tell this wasn't easy for her. No one was forcing her to be here, so it had to be important for her to share it. It talks to me, she said. Tells me things. I don't think I can handle all it's telling me on my own. That's why I came to talk to you. That's what I'm here for. I don't know where to start. Is it good? Bad? Evil? Those terms don't really apply to the entity. It has no equal. Nothing in all realities comes close. The often used example of a human taking a walk and unknowingly trampling hundreds of ants, ending them, is closer to the gods in relation to us. The gods would be the ants in relation to the entity. I looked at her silently. Sometimes I helped her respond with silence when patients made extraordinary claims. She didn't flinch. I said, now that you've got that bit of blasphemy out the way, are your dreams affecting your sleep? No, they can be unsettling, but I rarely wake up screaming. I see. You only see the entity in your dreams. Yes. So it's in your head? Her face twitched. I was off my game today. I'm usually more sympathetic with my patients. She said, I told you it's real. I nodded softly. Where is it? To tell you where it is, I'd have to give you perspective. I'm all ears. She took a breath to compose herself and said, we live here on Earth. Last I checked, yes. And the Earth is just one of 8 planets in our solar system. There are also dwarf planets, asteroids, moons, and comets. Yes, and our solar system is just one of billions. Hundreds of billions of star systems in our galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy. Yes, and the Milky Way galaxy is just one of 2 trillion galaxies in our observable universe, all with billions of star systems of their own. Yes, and our observable universe is just 3% of our entire universe, with light from all the galaxies we can't see never having reached us since the birth of our universe. I don't know if that's scientifically proven. Did the entity tell you that? Stay with me, Doc. We'll get to the entity. Okay, go on. Our universe, in its entirety, is held in a locket worn by God, the man upstairs. He, capitalized H and E, lives in the realm of the infinite gods. Again, I took a second to just look at her. There was certainty in her eyes. Certainty in a belief I was sure no one else believed. Infinite. I asked. She nodded. Yes, if you started counting them today, you'd still be counting when our universe dies, trillions of years from now. I know what infinite means. I just thought there was only the one. She smiled. Her eyes were intently focused on me. She had no doubts about what she had just said. Of course you did, Doc, she uttered. If it makes you feel better. You don't have to acknowledge the others if you don't want to. Anyway, when addressing him, all the letters should be capitalized to show respect. He sends everyone who does it differently straight to hell. No exceptions. My turn to nod. I'll pray for forgiveness and do it correctly from now on. You should. The entity tells me hell is not a nice place. And also, the locket worn by God is not unique. All the other gods have them, all with universes of their own. So there's a multiverse of sorts. God's locket is special, however, for 3 reasons. Very few of the infinite gods have created universes with such perfect physical laws that they remain stable for billions of years. Even fewer have created ones where galaxies can form without immediately collapsing in on themselves. And only 3 of the infinite gods have created universes so perfect that conditions are just right not just for life, but sentient life like us. They are God, aka the man upstairs, the Lord Almighty. After eons of hard work, he was so impressed with his creation that he made the only sentient beings in his universe. Us, flawed, not perfect, just to spice things up. The goddess, she insists on the first letter of her name always being capitalized. She, her, the queen, her universe is full of sentient life. But none of them are close to our level. And lastly, the Buddha, he's the only human to ever ascend to the realm of the gods. He's a very chill god. He doesn't care how you write his name, or even if you mispronounce it. The point is you tried. That's all he cares about. This is a lot of information. Her brow furrowed. You tired, Doc? Need a break? Want to take a walk to clear your thoughts? Calm your nerves? Believe it or not, Joan, I'm also a person. This is a lot of information to take in all at once. I'm struggling to keep up, but I'm still listening. She looked at me, perplexed, as if surprised a therapist could admit a weakness. Some of my clients think I'm superhuman. It's often advantageous in my line of work. It's easier for people to look for help from someone they think is infallible. But I found it can calm them down quickly to give them a dose of reality. And Joan needed to calm down. Good, she said uncertainly. She looked at the floor for a moment. Continue, I said. Her eyes regained their focus when she looked back at me. She felt she had to tell someone about this. She nodded to herself and said, Okay, the other gods are jealous of the three. Worst among them, Lucifer, Satan, the devil. All his names must always be written in lowercase, for maximum disrespect. His universes are always the laziest, most pathetic of all. So he plots against the greatest, that of the man upstairs, God. He plots especially against us, humans, God's greatest creation. No other God has ever created anything that comes close to our level of intelligence and self-awareness. So Satan wants to destroy us. God is a superior in every way. All Satan's plots have failed. So far. Anyway, the realm of the infinite gods is held inside a telekinetic ball powered by the entity. Finally, what does the entity look like? She shrugged. I don't know. I only see the space around it in my dreams. I'm not meant to see it. The entity is the first being, the first consciousness, the first intelligence, created by none, creator of all. It is all-knowing, all-seeing, omnipresent. Not even the gods can comprehend its true size. And it speaks to me in my dreams. What does the entity say? It says a lot of things. I'm aware of the privileged position I'm in, that I'm receiving its wisdom. It has told me that the Buddha had it right. Food is the simplest form of happiness. Other things that can bring happiness are too fleeting and unreliable. The entity tells me to eat. Cake, pie, fries, burgers, steaks. I noticed you've gained a few pounds since I last saw you. I thought wise not to mention it. Eating is good for everyone, but I don't think we should overindulge. Joan smiled, shaking her head. That's what the man upstairs says. But HE's got it wrong. The entity says we shouldn't deny ourselves our sustenance. If you eat cake and ice cream all day, every day, you'll be happy all the time. And perpetual happiness brings enlightenment. Look where the Buddha ended up. I thought he reached enlightenment after years of intense meditation. That was just half of it. The other half was delicious food. The entity told me, you should try it. I pretended to consider it. To be honest, the idea wasn't unappealing. My lunchtime meals tend to be on the healthy side, often unappetizing. A nice treat every now and then couldn't hurt. I'll tell my secretary to order me a whole bag of chocolate chip cookies for lunch. And there are 20 cookies in the bag. Yes, and a packet of marshmallows, 2 hot dogs, and 5 slices of avocado toast. Joan beamed at me. That's the spirit. I see a smile on your face. It's already working. I laughed. I really was going to try. Just for today. Indeed, I said, but you said the entity told you something unsettling. Joan's mood soured. She nodded. Yes, the entity also told me that the devil will eventually succeed. Story 8. Don't go near Penn Hills in the Pocono Mountains. I've spent most of my life exploring places people forgot existed. Decaying malls, abandoned schools, shutter hospitals. In particular, I had a penchant for abandoned honeymoon resorts. The kind of places where the air smells like mildew and forgotten memories. Whether you call a hobby, obsession, or trespassing, I call it work, or as other people call it, urban exploration. I'm a photographer, and while I don't mean to brag, I have to say I'm a pretty good one too. Photographing these places that have decayed past their prime and posting them online with factoids about their history has gotten me pretty far. Last weekend, I went to the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania, more specifically, to the old Penn Hills Resort. My parents honeymooned there in the early 70s, and I've only seen in their faded Polaroids. A mirrored lobby that reflected ceiling chandeliers from every angle, heart-shaped tubs in every suite, a wedding bell-shaped pool outside. I'd never asked them much about it. Nostalgia wasn't their language, but it was mine. So I packed up my gear and headed out to scout my next project. The hotel had closed in 2009, but was dying long before that. Only a few short years later, it was already being swallowed by the forest. Windows boarded up, vines crawling over brickwork like anxious fingers, according to local rumor. The kind you hear from gas station clerks who never leave town and locals who grew up around the area. The place had shut down after a mysterious string of incidents. Guests disappearing, staff quitting in droves, and a series of accidents in the pool area that no one wanted to talk about. I didn't believe in curses or ghosts. I believed in wood rot and mismanagement. It was dipping into late afternoon by the time I headed out the door, so I knew I'd get some golden hour lighting if I didn't hit traffic. Driving down to the Poconos, it's easy to see why it's been a honeymoon destination for decades. It feels like you're driving right into a storybook. Wild deer and small brooks are all accoutrements to the mountainous dreamscape that makes you feel like you're in another time, stuck in the sweet spot of Americana glory people always talk about. I parked my aging RAV4 on a side road and walked along the sprawling display of weeds and overgrowth until I found the remnants of pavement cracked and weathered. Well, here it is, I thought to myself as I approached the vine-engulfed structure. The main building was nearly destroyed with most of it falling on itself, but still traversable. The surrounding buildings like the ice rink, suites, and rec center were in mostly good shape. I thought I'd photograph some heart-shaped tubs, maybe a champagne tower, and some vintage signage. Walking inside the first set of suites, the smell hit me first. Wet pine needles, rotting carpet, mildew, and something faintly metallic. I cracked a grin. Classic abandoned building perfume. I should have known better than to be alone, but I had my camera gear, my flashlight, a switchblade, and a pair of gloves. The basic uniform of someone who pretends he's prepared for anything. The mirrored ceiling reflected everything, but it was cloudy with dust, so the reflections were warbly. The carpet had turned a grim shade of brown, instead of an original rich crimson. I thought to myself, the last people to care left 2 decades ago. I explored the first few suites slowly, looking for forgotten treasures and peeking out the windows of the endless forest outside. Room numbers were painted in curling gold script on each door. 101, 102, 103, some locked, most warped. I finally found 107, the suite my parents had stayed in. The door hung slightly ajar. That wasn't odd. Vagrants, other urbexers, and bored local kids were notorious for doing what I was doing. Some even overstaying their welcome or trashing the place. The bed frame was intact, though the mattress sagged like it had given up. The heart-shaped tub still gleamed faintly under the grime. I crouched and photographed everything, narrating to myself like I was giving a tour. Noticed the peeling wallpaper, faint scorch marks on the carpet. Architectural optimism meets entropy. I chuckled at my own jokes, trying to calm the rising awareness that this place was too quiet. Penn Hills had a different air to it. Then I heard it, a faint thump, like someone closing a box upstairs. I froze, flashlight sweeping the room, heart tightening. My first thought, animals, raccoon, squirrel, maybe even a raccoon-sized squirrel. My second thought, human. That's when the wit in my head started muttering warnings. Classic horror tropes I'd read so many times. Don't investigate alone. Don't split up. Don't open closed doors. In that moment, I realized cliches are only cliches because they have been experienced so many times and are rooted in truth. The stairwell reeked of mildew and dust, and every step made the old groan. As I moved to what I thought was the second set of suites next door, I noticed the corridor doors. Most were closed. A couple had broken locks and gaping holes. Then I saw it. An office door with staff only carved faintly in peeling paint. These were rooms used for meetings and offices, probably from when Penn Hills tried to turn into a conference center when the honeymoon business was going belly up in the late 90s. The thumping was coming from there. I approached slowly, flashlight shaking slightly. I peeked through a crack. The room was small. Desks, filing cabinets, yellowed paper scattered everywhere. In the corner, a man crouched over a desk, moving methodically through piles of paperwork. He was wearing a janitor's uniform. His hair was stuck to his head, like a bird that had just hatched from an egg. His body was thin, and his limbs long. He looked like he belonged to the hotel's first crew. He didn't look up. He didn't even seem aware I existed. Then I noticed what he was holding, a stack of Polaroids. Pictures of me entering the building, me exploring the lobby, me looking cluelessly around the first set of suites. Unaware I was being watched. I froze. He murmured numbers, counting them like money, calculating something I wasn't meant to understand. I stepped back. My flashlight slipped. A metallic clang. He turned his head slowly, eyes white around dark pupils. His lips stretched into something like a smile, revealing graying gums and yellow teeth, sending a chill down my neck. "I've been waiting," he said, not malicious. Matter of fact, I ran down the stairs, through the lobby, across the overgrown driveway. I didn't stop until my car was in sight, doors locked, engine roaring. My hands shook, adrenaline buzzing with every heartbeat. Back home, I replayed everything in my head. I wanted a rational explanation, maybe a security guard who never left and had a sick sense of humor. But the photos were too many for someone just trying to catch me trespassing. And if that's all he wanted, why didn't he call the police? I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't stop thinking about being watched and knowing he could have gotten me if he wanted to. What was his intention? After all, he was just a man. Patient, methodical, utterly unshaken by the moral weight of what he was doing. I called my parents the next day. The hotel? They remembered it as charming, idyllic, a blur of champagne and laughter. They remembered the staff as friendly and helpful. They remembered nothing unusual. I didn't tell them about the man or the pictures or the way he had been waiting. As the days went on, I couldn't shake the feeling I was still being watched. At night when I was lying in bed or brushing my teeth at the bathroom sink, I'd feel the gaze of the unknown stranger somewhere behind me. It was a strange feeling you get when you know someone is staring at you without turning around. I dismissed it as paranoia. Eventually life went back to normal, and I almost forgot about the whole ordeal. Almost. Weeks later I got a letter. Brown envelope. No return address. No address on the front at all. Like someone placed it directly into my mailbox. Inside, a Polaroid of me standing in my apartment kitchen, looking down at a cup of coffee. From what I understand, Penn Hills isn't haunted. There's no ghost waiting for you in the heart-shaped tub. There's a man, patient, observant, careful, waiting for the right moment to catch you off guard. I don't know what he wants or how long he's been there, but I do know this: every abandoned place I've explored, every cracked floorboard I thought I was safe on, every wry comment I made about horror tropes, it was all irrelevant when face to face with a terrifying encounter like this. It doesn't need to be supernatural to be horrifying. He's just sitting in there, or maybe somewhere else, taking photographs. Be careful where you trespass. He might be waiting for you. Story 9. I went hiking and almost died. I found forgotten bear trap the hard way. This happened a year ago when I went hiking alone in a state park. I'm writing it down because I still have nightmares about it, and my therapist says it might help to get out. I don't know if that's true, but here it is. The ridge must have washed out sometime in the last couple weeks. I stood at the edge of the trail where runoff had carved a gully through the packed earth, exposing tree roots twisted through the dirt. Murky water still pooled at the bottom. I could backtrack, add an hour, maybe two, or I could cut through the trees, parallel the trail for a few hundred yards, rejoin it past damage. Honestly, it would be quicker just to go overland and cut out the switchback entirely. It was probably less than a mile. The forest here was old-growth Douglas fir, the canopy thick enough to turn noon into twilight, sword ferns everywhere, thick clumps of salal between the trees, but it looked passable. I checked my phone out of habit. No signal. Hadn't been one since the last fire road. I pushed into the trees. The ground gave under my boots, soft with rot and moss. Humid air pressed against my face, carrying the smell of decomposition and wet bark. My breathing was loud, the rustle of my pack against my shoulders. I picked my way between ferns, trying to maintain a straight line. The washed-out section couldn't be more than a quarter mile. Easy enough. The trail disappeared behind me after 20 yards. I didn't see the trap until my boot was already through the leaf litter. The snap was mechanical. Final. I didn't understand at first. Pressure clamped around my calf. The world tilted before I understood why, and I hit the ground. My pack twisted, straps digging into my shoulders. My vision went dark at the edges. It slowly cleared. I was on my back, staring up through the canopy. My chest worked like I'd been sprinting, short and shallow gas that didn't seem to bring in enough air. I forced myself to look down. The trap was old, rust-pitted and half-buried. The jaws had closed just below my knee. Metal teeth punched clean through my pants leg. Fabric had torn where it had pressed into flesh. Blood was already soaking through the denim, spreading in a dark stain. I tried to pull my leg back. The trap didn't move. The pain doubled, and a sound came out of me that I didn't recognize. My hands were shaking when I reached down to touch the metal. The jaws had sunk deep enough that I couldn't get my fingers between steel and my leg. I pulled at the springs on either side, but they were fused with corrosion, immovable. I lay back, tried to think. Something inside my calf kept jumping, spasming under the skin. When I shifted my weight, the bones ground together and my vision whited out for a second. The blood spread further, running down into my boot now. I tilted my head back and screamed. My pack. I needed my pack. I twisted, ignoring the spike of pain, and dragged it off my shoulders. My fingers felt thick and clumsy as I unzipped the main compartment. First aid kit, water, food, headlamp. Nothing that would pry open a bear trap. My phone was in the side pocket. No signal when I pulled it up. The bleeding hadn't stopped. My sock was soaked through, boot filling, warm spread down to my toes. I didn't know how much blood I could lose. Couldn't remember if I'd ever known. Wait for rescue. Stay put. Conserve energy. Hope someone noticed I was overdue. Except no one knew I'd left the trail. And the trail itself saw maybe 3 hikers a week this time of year. I'd signed the register at the trailhead yesterday morning. If someone found my car in a few days, they'd start a search. But they'd look along the marked route first. It could be a week before anyone pushed into the section of forest. I had to get out of the trap. I pulled my hiking pole from the side of my pack, then the paracord from the bear bag setup, 30 feet of it, and a carabiner. I looped the paracord through the carabiner and clipped it to the trap spring mechanism on the right side, fed the other end through and around the hiking pole. I'd need to pry both springs at once to release the jaws, but if I could get one side open even partially, create some give, maybe the other would follow. I braced the pole against a nearby root and pulled. The cord went taut. The spring didn't move. I repositioned, planted my good leg for leverage, and pulled harder. My palms burned with the cord dug in. The pole bowed slightly. The spring gave a fraction of an inch, then held. Not enough. I unwound the cord and tried a different configuration. More wraps around the pole for mechanical advantage. This time when I pulled, The spring shifted. A quarter inch. Half. The jaws loosened. The teeth dragged through muscle as they moved. Tissue tore. The serrated edge caught on something deep inside my leg and pulled. The pain shot up into my hip, down to my ankle. My stomach lurched. I kept pulling. The spring gave another inch. The pressure on my leg decreased slightly. The teeth had punched through skin and fat into the meat underneath. Dark blood welled up. I blacked out. When I came to, I was on my side in the leaves. The pole had fallen. The spring had snapped back into place. My leg was still in the trap. I lay there for a while. Could have been 30 seconds. Could have been 5 minutes. Then I sat up and started again. This time I didn't stop when the pain spiked. I pulled until my arms shook, until the core bit deep grooves into my palms. The spring moved. The other side shifted in response. Corroded metal shrieking. The jaws opened. I dragged my leg out. Flesh came with it. Strips of tissue caught on the teeth, stretching and tearing as my calf pulled free. I saw bone, white fragments among the red. Part of my pant leg stayed behind. Fabric embedded in the mechanism. The trap snapped shut again, empty. The wound ran in a complete circle, punctures and lacerations where each tooth had sunk in. The deepest points were on either side, front and back, where the jaws had closed. Dark meat, shredded. Deeper than that, past the subcutaneous fat. The pale gleam of my tibia. Blood poured out. I fumbled for the first aid kit. 3 tries to get the zipper open. Gauze pads. Medical tape. A single ace bandage that would do exactly nothing. I packed the gauze against the wounds, wrapping the entire calf. Blood soaked through immediately. I added more. Kept wrapping. Used the tape to hold it in place. Then the ace bandage over that. Pulled tight enough that my foot started to tingle. Not tight enough. Still bleeding through. I pulled my belt off and cinched it around my thigh, above the knee. Yanked it until the leather creaked. The bleeding slowed. My boot was full of blood. It sloshed when I moved my ankle. I needed a splint, something to keep the leg immobile. I looked around, found a fallen branch about the right length, and used the remaining paracord to lash it against my calf. The pressure made me gag, but I kept tying knots until it held firm. Done. Sweating despite the cold. My shirt stuck to my back. I looked at the surrounding forest, tried to orient myself. I'd been heading roughly northwest when I'd left the trail, meaning the trail should be northeast. But everything looked the same. Ferns and moss and Douglas fir trunks disappearing into shadow. No landmarks. No clear sight lines. My mind swam with pain. Which way? Which way? I picked a direction and started crawling. I couldn't put weight on the leg. Even the thought of trying made my vision blur. So I moved on my stomach, using my forearms to drag myself forward. My good leg kicked for purchase, boots sliding through the leaf litter. My injured leg caught on everything. Roots, exposed rocks. The splint would shift, and the bones inside would grind together, and I'd have to stop, forehead pressed into the dirt. My pack dragged behind me, still clipped to my chest strap, dead weight, but it had my water and my headlamp. I couldn't leave it. The forest floor was a mess of obstacles. Fallen logs I had to navigate around. Dense patches of salal that forced detours. My jacket snagged on thorns. My hand sank into soft rot that released the smell of decay. I'd gone maybe 50 yards when the rain started. Just a mist at first. Barely more than heavy air. Then it thickened, drops pattering on the canopy overhead, filtering down through needles. Minutes later, my jacket was soaked. Water ran down my neck, into my collar. The ground went soft under me, then soupy. I kept moving. Northeast. I was sure it was northeast. There was a slight upward slope, and I followed it, reasoning that the trail followed the ridge line. Uphill meant closer, except after another 100 yards the slope plateaued, and I found myself in a small clearing where a tree had come down years ago. The trunk was massive, half-rotted, covered in moss and shelf fungus. Beyond it, the forest continued, identical in every direction. I stopped, tried to think through the cold and the pain. Had I been going uphill or downhill? The slope had felt upward, but now I wasn't sure, and the rain made everything slick Disorienting. Distances stretched. Somewhere to my left, a branch cracked. I turned my head but saw nothing. Just the vertical lines of tree trunks fading into gray. Another crack, closer this time. Then a rustle of undergrowth. Deer, probably, or elk. The forest wasn't empty. I'd just been too loud earlier to notice. Now that I'd stopped, now that I was quiet, the sounds filtered back in, except they didn't sound like animals moving. I held my breath and listened. Something that might have been a voice, far off. I almost called back before I caught myself. Nothing out here but trees. I reached back and checked the tourniquet. Still tight. The gauze underneath was soaked, but the bleeding had slowed to a seep. I started moving again. The mud helped in some ways. It was slick enough that my body slid easier, my jacket gliding over the surface. But it also meant less traction for my good leg. I'd push off and my boot would spin out, sending me sliding sideways into a fern or a half-buried stone. My arms burned. Each pull forward took more effort than the last. Shoulders wrenching. The rain picked up. It pooled in the small of my back, ran down my sides. My hands were numb, fingers barely able to grip. I focused on small distances. That root 5 feet ahead, the gap between those two trees. One goal at a time. Somewhere above, the canopy thinned, and I caught a glimpse of sky. Solid gray, no sun to navigate by. The light was diffuse, directionless. I checked my phone. 2:18 p.m., less than 2 hours of crawling, and I covered maybe a quarter mile. At this rate, I'd still be in the forest when night came. The sharp pain in my leg had settled into a deep throb that never let up. I stopped to drink water. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped the bottle. Half of it spilled down my chin. I forced myself to swallow 3 long pulls, then capped it and kept going. The underbrush thickened. Sight lines shortened. I was crawling through sword ferns now, the fronds slapping against my face, and I had to push them aside to see more than a few feet ahead. A root caught my splint and twisted it sideways. The bone shifted. I felt it move, felt the broken ends grate against each other, and I screamed into the mud. Air came back. I'd veered off course, heading downhill now, the ground sloping away. Wrong direction. I angled right, trying to correct, but the slope steepened and I started to slide. My fingers clawed at the ground. Found nothing. I picked up speed, jacket slick with mud, and then the ground disappeared, and I was falling. The drop was only 6 feet, but I hit hard. Shoulder first, then my hip, and finally my injured leg slammed into the rocks at the bottom of the ravine. Everything went white. I was curled on my side, both hands clutching my thigh. I couldn't breathe, couldn't make my lungs work. My mouth opened and closed, but nothing came in. Then my diaphragm released, and I sucked in air, huge gasping pulls that burned my throat. I lay there. The ravine was narrow, maybe 10 feet across, choked with fallen branches and standing water. The walls were steep, slick clay embedded with stones. I'd slid down the eastern side. Above me the edge looked impossibly far away. My leg was screaming. Fresh, bright pain. Something had gotten worse. I didn't want to look, but I made myself. The splint had broken. The branch had snapped in the middle. The two was held together only by the paracord wrapping. My calf bulged between them, swollen and dark. The gauze was completely soaked through, more red than white. I closed my eyes. The rain continued. I could hear it hitting the water pooled around me, a soft patter that would have been pleasant under different circumstances. Cold seeped through my jacket, through my shirt, into my skin. I thought about staying here, just for a minute, long enough to rest. I could stay here, let the moss cover me. They'd find bones eventually, maybe the belt buckle. I opened my eyes. Through the rain and the gray light, something upstream, a gap in the trees. The ravine curved and widened, and beyond that curve the undergrowth thinned. I knew that gap. I'd seen it from the trail 2 days ago, a clearing where loggers had worked decades back. Stumps still visible among the new growth. The trail ran along the western edge of that clearing. I started crawling again. The ravine bottom was the worst terrain yet. Standing water hid the depth of the mud beneath. Twice my arm sank to the elbow and I had to wrench it free, the suction pulling at me. Branches jabbed into my stomach, my ribs, my broken leg dragged behind me. The splint catching on every obstacle. I moved in increments. 6 inches. A foot. Rest. Another foot. My breathing had gone shallow. I couldn't seem to get enough air, and my heart hammered against my sternum. The gap in the trees didn't get closer. I crawled for what felt like an hour, and it stayed the same distance away, fixed and unreachable. That wasn't possible. I was moving. I stopped and put my forehead against the ground. The mud was cold. It smelled like iron and rot. When I looked up again, the gap had shifted. Closer now, maybe 50 yards. I kept going. The ravine widened. The walls lowered. I passed a stump. It was soft and black with decay, and recognized it. I'd seen this stump. I was sure of it. Then I was in the clearing. The canopy opened overhead. Rain fell straight down, no longer filtered through needles and branches. The light was gray and flat. The far tree line was maybe 200 yards across open ground. And there, barely visible through the rain, a wooden post. Trail marker. My arms gave out. I lay in the mud with my face turned sideways, staring at the post. Weathered wood with a faded white blaze. I started crawling again. The clearing was less overgrown than the forest, but the ground was uneven, full of hidden depressions where my weight would suddenly drop and my leg would twist. Each time it happened, the pain spiked and my vision tunneled. I was shaking now. Full body tremors I couldn't control. My teeth chattered. I was going to die 50 yards from the trail. The thought made me laugh. A wet, ragged sound that turned into coughing. I crawled. The trail marker resolved as I got closer. 4 feet tall, the white blaze chipped and weathered but unmistakable. Beyond it was the trail itself, a thin line of packed earth cutting through the undergrowth. My arms were beyond burning now. They felt distant and mechanical. My good leg had stopped responding properly. When I tried to push off, it just twitched. Something cracked in the tree line to my right. I turned my head. A Douglas fir swayed, branches moving, but there was no wind. The rain fell straight down. I watched the tree for a long time, waiting for it to move again. It didn't. Finally, my hand touched the post. Rough wood under my palm, solid and real. I pulled myself alongside it and onto the trail. The ground was harder here, packed dirt instead of mud. I lay on my back and stared up at the sky. The rain hit my face, ran into my eyes. The light was fading, gray shifting toward dark. In another hour, I wouldn't be able to see. The trailhead was north. 2 miles, maybe 3. I'd made better time on the way in, but I'd been walking then in hold. I couldn't crawl 2 miles. I knew that with absolute certainty. My body had nothing left, but the trail meant people. Not today, probably not tomorrow, but eventually, someone would come through. They'd find me if I lasted that long. I rolled onto my stomach and kept moving. The trail made it easier. No routes to navigate around. No hidden drops. Just a clear path forward. My vision kept blurring, edges going dark. I'd blink and find myself 10 feet further, along with no memory of covering the distance. My injured leg had gone numb below the knee. I couldn't tell if that was good or bad. Maybe I'd left the tourniquet too tight. Maybe the nerves were just gone. I didn't have the energy to check. The shaking had gotten worse. My jaw ached from clenching against the chatter. Somewhere ahead, I heard an engine. A truck, maybe, or a car with a bad muffler. The trailhead had a small parking area. Gravel lot, room for 5 or 6 vehicles. I'd left my car there yesterday morning. If I could make it to the lot, even if no one was there, I could get inside the car, turn on the heat, call for help once I had signal. The engine sound faded. I crawled faster, arms pulling, good leg kicking. The trail curved, and I followed it, staying in the center where the ground was most even. My hands were torn up, palms shredded and bleeding from the paracord earlier, from rocks and roots, and 7 hours of dragging myself across the forest floor. They didn't hurt. Nothing hurt except my leg. The rain stopped. I didn't notice at first. Then I realized my face was dry, the patter of drops on my jacket gone. I looked up. The clouds were still there, but the rain had passed. The temperature dropped further. I needed to stop shaking, needed to conserve energy, but my body wouldn't listen. The tremors ran through me in waves, muscles firing without my input. The trail dipped into a small depression, then rose. At the top of the rise, light shone through the trees. Not daylight, yellow and artificial. Street light. Light ahead, the solar lamp at the trailhead, yellow against the trees. The last 100 yards took forever. The trail rose gradually, and my arms barely had the strength to pull me uphill. I'd move a few feet, stop, wait for my vision to clear, then move again. The light got brighter. I could make out individual trees now, the edge of the parking lot, the square shape of the information kiosk. The parking lot was empty. No cars, just gravel and the wooden kiosk, and the solar lamp throwing its yellow circle across the ground. My car was gone. I stared at the empty space where I thought I'd left it. Maybe someone had dropped me off. Or maybe I'd parked at a different trailhead and gotten confused. I realized I was going into shock. I pulled myself past the trailhead sign, onto the gravel. Stones dug into my elbows. My leg dragged behind me. The broken splint scraping. The lamp hummed above me. I could hear it clearly now that I was out of forest. A steady electrical buzz. Beyond the parking lot was the access road. Single lane, poorly maintained. It connected to the main highway, about 3 miles north. During the day, there'd be traffic. Logging trucks, the occasional tourist. But it was past 7 now. Full dark within the hour. I crawled to the edge of the road and stopped. Asphalt under my hands. Smooth and flat. I pressed my cheek against it and closed my eyes. I didn't pass out. I stayed conscious, aware of the cold and the pain, and the way my pulse felt thin and distant. But I couldn't move. My arms were done. My good leg wouldn't respond. I lay there and listened. The forest behind me was quiet. No wind, no animal sounds. Just that electric hum from the lamp and my own breathing. Time passed. I wasn't sure how much. Then I heard something new. Faint at first. A low rumble from the north. I opened my eyes. Headlights appeared around the curve, maybe half a mile up the road. 2 white beams cutting through the dusk. The engine sound grew louder. I tried to lift my arm. Managed to get it a few inches off the ground before it fell back. The vehicle was closer now. 1/4 mile. It was a truck, high chassis, moving slow on the rough road. I opened my mouth. My throat was raw and tight. The sound that came out was barely more than a rasp. The truck kept coming. I tried again, louder this time. A hoarse shout that tore at my vocal cords. The headlights swept across me, catching me sprawled half on the asphalt, mud-covered jacket. Destroyed leg dragging behind. The truck's brakes squealed. It stopped 20 feet away, engine idling. The driver's door opened and someone got out. I couldn't see details, just a silhouette against the headlights. Footsteps on gravel, running, then a voice. Jesus Christ. I tried to answer, but nothing came out. Hands on my shoulder and my arm. The person kept talking. Something about an ambulance, about staying awake. I heard the beep of the phone, numbers being pressed. Yeah, I need emergency services. I'm on Forest Road 38, just past the trailhead. I've got a guy here. He's in bad shape. Looks like his leg is... Yeah, he's conscious. Barely. The voice moved away, still talking. I heard the truck door open, the rustle of fabric. Then the person was back, draping something over me, a blanket. They're coming, the voice said. 10 minutes, maybe 15. You hang on. I managed to nod, the smallest movement. The person stayed next to me. I could hear them breathing. Beyond the parking lot, the forest was dark. But the blanket was warm and I was still alive. I spent 8 days in the hospital. They had to do 3 surgeries to clean out the wound and repair what they could. The bone was badly fractured. Muscle damage was extensive. Nerve damage worse. I still walk with a limp. My calf is mostly scar tissue now, numb in places, hypersensitive in others. I can't run anymore. The rangers went back and found the trap. It was ancient, probably from the 30s or 40s, when people still trapped in that area. Illegal now, and it should have been cleared decades ago, but it wasn't. Just sitting there under the leaves, waiting. They checked my car situation. Turns out I had parked at the trailhead. A ranger had ticketed it for an expired Discover Pass and had it towed. I laughed when they told me. Couldn't help it. I'd been meaning to get it renewed for over a year and kept forgetting. The guy who found me was a logger heading home after a late shift. Right place, right time. The doctor said if I'd been out there another hour, I probably would have bled out or gone into complete shock. Sometimes I still dream about crawling. I wake up and my arms are moving, pulling at the sheets. And for a second I'm back in that forest with the rain coming down and no idea which direction I'm going. Story 10. I went on a ghost hunting trip to look for a witch. I found her. They called her Long Lanor. According to legend, she got that name due to her torture at the hands of the townsfolk who accused her of witchcraft. Lanor was an unassuming woman who dabbled in medicine and recorded remedies she'd find using natural ailments found in the forest. Yet, the local deacon of the town's church accused her of communion with Satan himself. So, for the enlightened folks that they were, they put her on a rack. She stretched her legs and arms until she fessed up to her sin. Lanor, however, maintained her innocence even in her pain. In the end, the town made up its mind and decided she was a witch because of what happened to her body. They claimed that no human could have their limbs stretched so far without being ripped from the body by the time she was beheaded. He limb sagged behind her like limp rope. In the years since, townsfolk claimed that they had seen her walking through the woods. Impossibly long limbs striding amongst the trees with a small body and a head floating above the stump where the axe severed the neck. It is said that if she finds you, she'd stretch your limbs until they're taut and snap off. Over the years, whenever a hunter or lost person was found dead in the woods, folks would say, Lanor got another one. The original town eventually became a ghost town due to the ever-expanding America, but the legend of Long Lanor remained. Locals who lived close to the woods where this folk tale allegedly happened sold shirts, posters, mugs, and many other pieces of merchandise. I won't tell you which state I went to or what town we visited to ask for directions. We shouldn't have gone, and I prefer that none of y'all go out into the woods either. Our show was called What the Folk, and we'd go around state to state, county to county, asking and investigating folk tales and urban legends. It may have been a YouTube channel, but we took the show very seriously because we wanted to be taken seriously. We started in New York and worked our way down. Each season, we'd set up shop in a state and just spend the rest of the show going to each county to look into as many legends as we could. The Jersey Devil was our most viewed episode on YouTube, garnering a total of 679,000 views. There was Sarah, Duke, Aaron, and me. We were childhood friends, and we'd grown up watching shows like MTV's Fear, Ghost Hunters, Scariest Places on Earth, and Destination Truth. We loved the paranormal because it was so much fun to look into another world and believe in things that might be outlandish. You could tell someone a legend of the Jersey Devil and they'd scoff. But if you put that same person in the woods in the middle of the night with nothing more than a flashlight and a camera, you bet your ass they believe. We were beginning season 4 and setting up shop in the next state we'd chosen. The hotel we were staying at was shabby but clean and more than comfortable. It was November, and the days were growing shorter than usual, not to mention the cold, making it tough on Duke, who had metal pins in his wrist due to an accident when he was in middle school. Why can't we take a hiatus again? Duke asked. The last season got the most views we've gotten in our entire time on YouTube. Aaron said, we've got momentum. Duke just nodded in agreement and kept typing away on computer. Sarah was the one who went out asking about urban legends. Sure, she could use the internet, but she preferred to ask people in person. Her reasoning being that anyone online could claim to be seeing a UFO or ghost, but we live in cynical times, and anyone with a keyboard will say anything for attention and irony. But whenever you talk to someone in person, you can tell from just the way they speak that they're either lying or telling the truth. At this time, I was checking all of the equipment to check the sound, video, and lights of the show. I took pride in making sure that everything worked. Being the unofficial tech guy was a job I started to enjoy. I was halfway through checking the walkie-talkies when Sarah walked in with a big smile. I got our next story. "Okay, shoot," Duke said as he lay back on one of the beds. "Long Lanor." Aaron looked up from his laptop and asked, "Can't say I've heard of that one." Sarah stood in the room, gesturing wildly as she told us the story. It's like she was in a pitch meeting and we were the investors. In a way, it was because once we're on a project, we're stuck with it for days until we have enough footage to cobble together an episode. Duke spoke up after she finished. "And you heard this and who exactly?" She tossed a town brochure on the bed. It read, "Welcome ____________, home of Long Lanor, the witch." Duke looked it over as Sarah threw a beer cozy with a cartoon version of Lanor to Aaron and a shirt to me. I said, "So, we're in a tourist trap sort of town?" Yes and no. I talked with a town historian, and she said that the original settlement where the story took place is in the backwoods of ____________. Duke sat up. "So there's an abandoned old town from the 1700s out there?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Sarah added. Aaron chimed in, "Dude, the production value alone of a creepy-ass village is gonna do numbers. You know how many times we investigated the woods, or an abandoned warehouse, or some boring-ass haunted room? This shit has potential." They turned to me for some sort of indication, but I told them that wherever they went, I'd go. Right then and there, it was decided that the next big vid would be about Long Lanor, the witch. Sarah did more digging about the legend, and tried to find precise location of the original settlement that was in the area all those years back. And the guys and I were doing street stuff, asking locals about the legend of Long Lanor. Every person gave a concrete answer and a story to go with it. I saw Lanor walking in the trees when I went hunting. Lanor was peering at my window while I was sleeping. I live on the second floor of an apartment. I saw Lanor climbing a tree at night. She was dragging something up with her. That bitch Lanor killed my dog, Biscuit. Folks say that Lanor only comes out at night, but I swear I saw her looking at me from the side of the road. And many others. We rented a cheap off-roader, and I put our equipment into plastic containers. Our voice recorder, spirit box, EMF cameras, spare batteries, flashlights, and so much other shit. Sarah returned to us from the ledge route to take us to where the site should be, and we waited for the sun to set. We drove out and went deep into the woods. It was freezing cold. We bundled up heavily, but the combination of cold winds and no windows in the off-roader made the November weather stink all the worse. For nearly an hour, we drove over twigs, dead leaves, and would occasionally get rocked by a stump hidden by moss. Duke stopped the vehicle as Sarah looked at the map. Aaron looked to me with an annoyed look and whispered, "This episode is going to be a bust." I didn't say anything because I liked Sarah. She'd always been responsible for our best episodes, and she was like our rock of the group. Before I could say anything, Sarah spoke up, "We should be close." "You sure?" Duke asked. "Positive." We were running out of light. But we eventually came to a clearing as the sky turned a deep red with purple clouds streaking across the horizon. In the clearing was a dilapidated wooden palisade coated in moss. The front gate door was lying inside the palisade, and grass had overtaken everything except for the latch. We all stared in disbelief. The old town was still here, overtaken by nature, sure, but still. "No fucking way," Aaron whispered. "Told you," Sarah said to him. Duke drove closer. The off-roader couldn't drive over the fallen gate, so we got out and began to set up shop. We lugged the stuff into town, walking over grass that was most likely once dirt roads. Even within the walls, the trees loomed over us, their dead limbs reaching out into the sky. We took the cameras and set them atop the perimeter of the walls surrounding the town, looking into the woods. The night vision worked like a charm because within a minute, We had footage of a herd of deer grazing in the distance, their eyes glowing in the night vision. We tested everything else, and all the equipment was in good working condition. We recorded a brief intro, got B-roll of the village, and then we just waited. It got dark quickly, and it somehow got colder. The moon hung over us, illuminating our surroundings. It was perfect for the show, but if we didn't get something recorded, it'd just be a pretty-looking filler episode. However, finding this little town in the woods was a pretty neat find on Sarah's part. I was on my laptop, monitoring the camera from within an abandoned church. Sarah, Aaron, and Duke walked the perimeter trying to get EVPs and provoke the spirit, so to speak. I never heard them speak until they'd say something into their walkie-talkies. I sat crisscross on the floor because I had forgotten to bring a fold-out table and chair for the setup. The wireless connection to the feed was strong. "Will," Aaron said, "will you be getting anything yet?" "Not yet," I said. Late night shoots, especially in the cold, could be brutal. I may have been indoors, but it was musty, damp, and freezing. No amount of layers could really help. I lazily looked over the feed from the cameras, trying to fight sleep, until I saw what camera 4 was picking up. I was looking at a static shot of a tree lean for hours. It was the same image I saw when I first set it up. Then what I had thought was a tree began to shift and move. From a tree lean, an enormous, thin creature emerged, its arms spread out, basking in the moonlight. But as I watched this thing stalking about, I realized that it was her. She was always here, watching us the entire time, waiting for us. Its body was small with gangly limbs and a head floating above a torso. I couldn't get a clear look at its features from the grainy night vision footage, but her hair swirled about as if it were underwater. I picked up my walkie with a shaking hand and spoke. "Camera 4, I've got something." They radioed back. "What will you see?" Sarah asked. "Heading there now." Duke said. "Wait." I screamed. "Just wait." I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at, but it's scaring me, man. The radio fizzled out, and then the feed of the camera died. I was left in the dark in the middle of a dark chapel. I tried to run outside, but that's when I heard Aaron scream out, "What the fuck is that?" Then they all started to scream. I wish I could tell you I was a hero and rushed out of the church to shout at Lanor, chasing her off or distracting her. But I'm not that kind of person. I sat, paralyzed in fear as I heard the screams grow louder. I heard snaps, gurgles, and wheezing last breaths. When you're in the middle of the forest, away from any noise of the city, you can hear things in perfect detail. When it stopped, I still didn't go out there. I knew it would come for me. A shadow overtook the empty church. I turned around to find that she was there at one of the shattered windows, his severed head peering in with a dull, milky eye. It was as if, after all this time, no matter what happened to this place, the church was still holy. She kept staring for what felt like an eternity, until eventually it went away, letting the moonlight return to the room. I let out a little cry of relief when she left. I'm not afraid to admit. I wanted to leave, but I knew she'd be waiting. My best option was to wait until morning. I sat on the floor of that old church for hours. It's funny I was fighting sleep, and now it was all I wanted. To my shock, the feed of the cameras returned. On camera 2, there was a huge bonfire. I saw my friends lying limp in the flames. Their limbs stretched to the point where they were dislocated and hanging by loose skin or completely ripped from the body entirely. Next to the fire was Lanor, dancing in the moonlight, the unnaturally stocky arms waving about with a smooth grace. Her hair wafted in the moonlight. She danced the entire night until the flames died. When the sun came out, I returned to the off-roader and sped off. I don't care if I left the equipment behind. I wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. The one thing I do wish I had brought with me was Sarah's map. I've been lost for 2 days now. The off-roader is out of gas, and I'm writing this from my phone. I called 911, but they've been unable to locate me. They occasionally call me to try and help, but I don't think I've got long. This morning, I saw her staring at me from a distance, her gray, callous skin blending in with the bark of the trees surrounding her. I think tonight will be my last. To Sarah, Duke, and Aaron, I'm so sorry.